Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Congressman Joe Wilson, and delighted to welcome you to the first meeting of the Military Personnel Subcommittee of the House Armed Services Committee for the 112th Congress. And I'm delighted we have an outstanding panel that we'll be getting to. Before I begin, I want to thank the staff members who helped make this subcommittee so important for our service members, military families, and veterans. And a living example of bipartisanship is to my left, and that is that Mike Higgins is remaining on to be the professional staff member. He has traditionally done this even in another Congress, and so like the 111th. And so I'm very grateful that Mike is available, and he is so knowledgeable in issues relative to what we'll be discussing today. And so I'm so happy that he has agreed to stay on. And of course, on the majority side, I'm very grateful that John Chapla, a very distinguished VMI graduate, is with us. And then we have Jeanette James, who has just been instrumental in promoting the military health issues for this committee. I want to thank also Craig Green and Jim Weiss, and on the minority side, Deborah Wada. And so we've got people who truly are available to all of you. And I also want to thank the individual staff of different offices who are here. And as we begin today, I also want to thank, we do have our freshman here. In fact, he's all of one right now. But hey, all you need is Colonel Alan West. And so, Colonel, I want to welcome you to the subcommittee. And it's just, and I know that we have a number of others who are on their way with so much going on simultaneously. At least we will not be interrupted by votes. And so this is going to be a remarkable occasion that we actually have an orderly committee meeting. The subcommittee on military personnel will begin the 2011 hearing cycle with 2 hearings on the Department of Defense DoD non-appropriated fund activities. Today we will focus on morale, welfare, and recreation MWR programs. Tomorrow the subcommittee will turn its attention to the commissaries and exchanges, DoD's grocery and department stores. The subcommittee has always viewed the wide range of programs that comprise the military morale, welfare, and recreation, or MWR community, as essential elements within a healthy military community. The subcommittee remains strongly committed to supporting these programs. However, it is clear that DoD has correctly crossed over into a new era of austerity marked by an increased fiscal scrutiny of all programs and an unrelenting pursuit of increased budget efficiency. As a recipient of appropriated funds, MWR programs will be subjected to increased pressure to maintain effectiveness while operating more efficiently. While demands for increased effectiveness and efficiency are to be expected, I fear that misperceptions about the absence of a link between MWR programs and combat readiness will place these programs at a greater risk of being cut too deeply. I believe that vibrant MWR programs are critical to the health of the military community they support, and the superior combat capability is directly dependent on the strength of the military community. We must not allow MWR programs to become easy targets for the budget cutters. Certainly, there will be cuts, and identifying the programs to be reduced will require difficult decisions. It is my hope that MWR managers are prepared to make those decisions and demonstrate the willingness to find savings. But those managers must also be prepared to fight hard to factually justify the programs that are truly critical to service members and their families. We hope to learn more about the strategy that MWR managers will pursue in the coming months to meet the demands of the new era of budget austerity. Next, I'd like to recognize Congresswoman Susan Davis, and I'd like to, even before she speaks, thank her for her prior role as the chairman of this committee. She always was a person who conducted the meetings fairly in a bipartisan manner. And I certainly want to continue the tradition of Congresswoman Chairman Susan Davis.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly will look forward to serving with you, and I just want to say that I know that you always were very supportive of my role, and I intend to be supportive of yours as well, and appreciate being here. And I also wanted to thank, of course, our witnesses that are here today, and to say that I, too, am very happy to have Mike Higgins sitting here between us because he is a tremendous source, and I also value all the other staff members who are going to be continuing. All have been very active on the Personnel Committee in the past and bring great skills and great aptitude in this area, and so it's a tremendous resource for us to have them. They really provide so much information and a real good source, I think, of thinking about ideas and how we go forward and what some of the challenges and the problems will be. And as we know in past years, we will have plenty of those. So I want to thank them as well. Mr. Gordon and Mr. Patrick, welcome. I believe that this is your first opportunity to be with us and before the subcommittee, and so I'm glad that you're here. Mr. Gorman, Mr. Larson, and Mr. Milam, welcome back to you all as well. Today is the first part of a two-day set of hearings that will focus on morale, welfare, and recreation programs and the military resale community. We hold these hearings annually because these programs are important and extremely valuable to our military personnel and their families. 10 years of conflict have placed a tremendous burden not only on those in uniform, but also on their families, and in particular, we know, their children. It's important in today's all-volunteer force that we ensure that the support they need is there for themselves and their families. And as the chairman has mentioned already, as we look at the budget climate ahead of us, we know that we have to ensure that the MWR and the military resale programs continue to provide a wholesome quality of life for those who volunteer to serve in uniform. We know, of course, that we also must ensure that spending resources are spent efficiently and effectively. We certainly have a responsibility to do that, but we also have to think about the service member and their families. I certainly look forward to an open and a frank discussion on these issues. The dedication and commitment of our MWR employees that they have displayed to our military families under the most challenging of conditions has been remarkable, and we are grateful for their contributions. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much. And of course, we couldn't proceed without recognizing and thanking Congresswoman Madeline Bardallo for being here. And she, of course, represents the strategic island of Guam. What a beautiful territory. If you ever get a chance to visit, Hawaii looks a lot like Guam. And then I'm very grateful we've been joined by the freshman contingent is now doubled. Thank goodness Congresswoman Becky Hartzler is here, and Congresswoman Hartzler is from Missouri and represents the extraordinary military facilities of Fort Leonard Wood. And so she will certainly be a great member of our committee, and she's already proven her dedication. We've discussed it to the military personnel and military families in her district and veterans. We're grateful to have an excellent panel of witnesses. Mr. Robert L. Gordon is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, Military, Community, and Family Policy, Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. Mr. Richard Gorman is the Chief Operating Officer of the U.S. Army Morale, Welfare, and Recreation Command. We have Mr. Rogers Patrick, who is the Acting Director of the Fleet Family and Readiness Programs, Commander, Navy Installations Command. Mr. Timothy R. Larson, who is the Director of Personal and Family Readiness Programs, Manpower and Reserve Affairs Department of the U.S. Marine Corps, and Mr. Charles E. Milam, Director of Air Force Services, Headquarters U.S. Air Force. And it is a great day for us, and that Mr. Gordon and Mr. Patrick, this is the first time that they've appeared before the committee, according to Mr. Higgins. And then, and he's always correct. Mr. Larson, Mr. Gorman, Mr. Milam, welcome back. And we may be joined at any time. We have a gentleman from Ohio, Congressman Mike Turner, to the hearing. He may be here to participate in the hearing, and I would ask for unanimous consent that he be permitted to do so following the members of the subcommittee. Without objection, so ordered. I ask unanimous consent that a statement from Lions Club International be included in the record. Without objection, so ordered. And we'll begin now with our witnesses.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of this subcommittee.
Thank you.
I'm delighted to testify before you today. I'm grateful for this committee's strong support and will provide a quick update of our MWR activities. I'm pleased to report that in 2009, the CFI group, whose methodology underpins the respected American Customer Satisfaction Index, conducted the first DoD MWR Customer Satisfaction Survey. The results indicate that MWR is fine, but could use work, which I don't think is surprising. The results help us to target available funding in areas that provide the greatest benefit in terms of improving MWR customer satisfaction. Fitness and outdoor recreation were highlighted as areas needing improvement. The survey will be conducted biennially. Thanks to the generous support of Congress, overseas contingency operation funding provides free Internet access, recreation, entertainment, and library programs for troops in combat. To remain flexible and provide child care surge capacity, we designed programs with civilian child care providers to help families find affordable, quality care close to home. In 2011, we will further expand child care for our families using local, state, and federal child and youth delivery systems. 13 states will participate in the pilot. DoD youth programs are particularly important now. About 117,000 military children have at least one parent deployed, and research suggests that they experience more stress than their peers. We fund a popular non-medical counseling program for children up to 18 years of age to discuss issues affecting them, including bullying, self-esteem, and coping with deployments. My written testimony outlines our ongoing work in greater detail. Please be assured that as we focused on our efficiencies, we will take care of our most valuable asset, our service members and their families. Thank you for your support.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, members
Thank you very much, and Mr. Gorman, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, I'm privileged to appear before you today to share some of the ways we honor and support our soldiers for their service and their sacrifice. Everything we do every day is designed to support soldiers. Sometimes the support is direct. At other times it is indirect through support to their families. But all we do is always with the soldier at the center of our focus. Your support through the difficult post-9/11 period has allowed us to be successful. Morale, welfare, and recreation serve soldiers wherever they serve. That includes those at Camp Arfajan, as well as those at Fort Hood and all points in between. MWR programs help soldiers maintain physical fitness and alleviate combat stress by temporarily diverting a soldier's focus from combat. It also increases readiness because mission accomplishment is directly linked to a soldier's confidence that their families are safe, resilient, and capable of carrying on during their absence. Soldiers, families, and civilians are our greatest strategic asset and are indeed the strength of our Army. The Army has long recognized that if we do not retain the family, we simply will not retain the soldier. I'm also very happy to report today that Army MWR Fund's collective financial posture is sound and supports our soldiers and families today and will into the future, with cash assets exceeding liabilities by a rate of 1.5 to 1. We've seen the huge burden of 9 years of war, and we will continue to care for our soldiers and their families, a top priority for our Army. On behalf of America's Army, I want to thank you for your continued and steadfast commitment, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. As an Army veteran and father of 3 sons currently serving in Army National Guard, thank you very much. Mr. Rogers Patrick.
Chairman Wilson, Ranking Member Davis, and distinguished Military Personnel Subcommittee members, I'm pleased to discuss the current status of the Navy's Morale, Welfare, and Recreation Program with you. The Navy has continued to make significant strides in providing top-quality MWR programs. During 2009, MWR remained financially sound, with resources totaling $920 million. This consisted of $426 million in appropriated fund support and $494 million in NAF program revenue generated, with a net income of $17 million. Results for fiscal year 2010 were also positive, and I'm pleased to report that after a 1-year deviation from the norm in 2009, Navy MWR has exceeded the 85% appropriate fund support metric for Category A programs and met the 65% metric for Category B programs in fiscal year 2010. Navy Installations Command's unique organization structure of bundling quality of life programs to include MWR, Fleet and Family Support Centers, the galleys, and housing for both families and bachelors into a single organization has enabled us to partner with our public-private venture housing corporate partners through neighborhood community centers. This quality of life model has lowered our program overhead costs and streamlined our communications processes. With support from the Congress, our President, and the Secretary of Defense, the Navy has funded more than 30 new child development centers, which will increase our current capacity by 7,000 spaces and reduce our waiting time for services to no more than 3 months. MWR programs provide sailors with a first-hand demonstration of the Navy's commitment to their quality of life. MWR offers some of the best recreation programs and developmental outlets for our sailors' family members. Whatever the need, wherever the location, our patrons know they can count on MWR to deliver on our promise of high-quality facilities, services, and programs. Thank you. I would like to submit the rest of my statement for the record, and I stand by to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patrick. We now have Mr. Timothy R. Larson.
Chairman Wilson, Ranking Member Davis, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to represent the Marine Corps and provide a report on our MWR and family readiness programs. We thank the Congress, especially this subcommittee, for your continued support and your recognition that these are critical programs to resiliency and readiness of Marines and their families. We've been engaged in a multi-year effort to transition Marine and family programs, and this includes the establishment of family readiness officers, the redesign of our exceptional family member and school liaison programs, and numerous quality of life improvements at remote and isolated commands. Feedback from Marines and families has been very positive, and we have built the requirement into our FY10 baseline budget with an increase of about $110 million. The current effort of program transitions, as outlined by General Amos in his planning guidance, is focused on enhancing the resiliency of Marines and families. Commanders, the Commandant's planning guidance also task us with ensuring that Marines and their families have access to quality facilities and support programs, as well as the resources necessary to provide a quality standard of living. His guidance also directs that we review and improve family readiness and transition assistance programs, and we move to more fully integrate behavioral health efforts within the Marine Corps. We appreciate the support from Congress, as well as our partnership with OSD and the work that we do with sister services, all of which help us and contribute to our ability to provide and deliver quality services and programs for our Marines and sailors. And on behalf of Marines and families, I thank the subcommittee for your oversight and continued support of Marine Corps programs. Look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Larson. We now have Mr. Charles E. Milam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and fellow Military Personnel Subcommittee members, for the opportunity today to present the status of Air Force MWR programs. We appreciate the leadership and support for the readiness and quality of life for our airmen and their families. The men and women of Air Force services are making remarkable contributions to ongoing overseas contingency operations and humanitarian efforts. We will not lose sight of our core function to provide mission-ready airmen. However, in order to focus on the mission, we must provide support for our airmen and their families. Simply put, caring for people. In my 25 years in Air Force services, our scope of operations has never been bigger. Our MWR team, nearly 48,000 strong, now provides the most robust caring for people programs in recent history. We have stretched our traditional MWR model to forge a stronger Air Force community, evolving and expanding our services to meet the constantly changing needs of our airmen and their families. Beyond our traditional combat support and community service roles, we are enhancing our efforts in warrior and survivor care, family readiness and resiliency, food transformation, non-medical counseling services, outreach programs, inclusive recreation, dignified transfers, and much more. Last year's Year of the Air Force Family reemphasizes our commitment to a strong sense of Air Force community, and Air Force Services has key roles in our enduring roadmap for expanded programs and services in health and wellness, airmen and family support, education and development, and airmen and family housing. As we build these better programs, though, we must also be vigilant about budget pressures to fund troop dollars for purposes that ought to be supported with appropriated funds. As a spouse of an Air Force officer who's currently deployed to Afghanistan and the father of 2 young children, I fully understand the challenges that we face and certainly the importance of taking care of our airmen and their families. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to working with this subcommittee, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Milam, and thank you for your family's service, too. And you certainly have a good perspective of how important military families are.
Yes, sir.
Continuing the tradition of Congresswoman Susan Davis, we will have the 5-minute rule, and Mr. Higgins is going to be the master of this. And so he is the final arbiter. And I want to thank all of you for being here. My interest, obviously, as a member of Congress, and I'm very grateful I represent Fort Jackson. I'm almost as fortunate as Congresswoman Hartzler. And I represent Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort, Parris Island, Beaufort Naval Hospital. And I have also, as a family member, I'm very grateful. I've got 3 sons who serve in the Army National Guard. I've got a son who's a doctor in the Navy, and I've got a nephew who is currently in the Air Force. So we're a joint service family. I certainly think it's reasonable expectation that budget pressures on installation commanders and other managers would require a reduction in appropriated funding for MWR programs. Those cuts could take the form of an across-the-board reduction against all MWR programs being diminished in effectiveness. But I hope and suggest that there may be more strategic perspective that protects the funding levels for critical programs while eliminating programs that are not as important to the welfare of military families and service members and veterans. Mr. Gordon, is there a DoD-wide plan to review all MWR programs to prioritize which programs should receive appropriated funds and which programs that do not match up?
Well, I think the services have done a very good job assessing their programs to getting a sense of the state of those programs now and the degree to which they provide effective quality of life for our service members and their families. One thing I think to note is that we have to be much more sharply focused on what families and service members want, first of all. And I had mentioned in my statement about the customer satisfaction survey. That helps to a great degree because we now know the points of emphasis for our families and our service members, what they consider important in terms of morale, welfare, and recreation, and we'll use that. But I think as important, maybe even more important, is our leadership. And we have the right leadership in place to make those sorts of assessments. You see some of it before you here. But that leadership has been very, very focused on ensuring the top priority for the human element of what we do in the Defense Department. As we all know, we're about machines and people. And as we usher in this 21st century, we've been at war now for 10 years. This notion of focusing on our human element, our service members, their families, because in terms of retention, in terms of readiness, it's absolutely essential. So with the customer satisfaction survey, with the assessment that the services have done in terms of morale, welfare, and recreation activities, and then with the success of those programs. You know, I was in the Army for 26 years and a dependent as well who lived overseas in the American Augsburg Youth Activities Association. So I've seen the transition. I was just at Fort Campbell, and the services that are provided today are just outstanding. So with respect to leadership, with respect to assessment of programs, and with respect to the infrastructure in place, I think we're in good shape.
And I appreciate using the word respect. Another way to phrase respect, too, is respect for family members, and so that's what you're doing. So
absolutely.
Thank you. And actually, for all other panel members, have there been funding reductions already? Do you see, what's the effect? And for each member, you can begin. Mr. Milam.
We haven't seen the exact numbers yet, but we are working some cut drills just to anticipate some reductions. We're focusing on certainly the warfighter first and some of our key warrior and survivor care programs for our wounded warriors, our mortuary affairs operations, child care. We just completed a Caring for People survey with over 100,000 responses from the total force to include Guard and Reserve and civilians and family members. That gives us a good indication of where we need to prioritize our resources. So without really seeing the specific cuts, we can't identify the exact cuts that will take place. But we are working the drills as we speak.
And Mr. Gorman.
Yes, sir. Thank you. We acknowledge the environment we're in. But if you also believe at the same time, I apologize. We acknowledge the environment we're in and the need to be ever more fiscally conscious. At the same time, we're blessed by the Army leadership's commitment to the Army Family Covenant. You're aware that General Casey came out of Iraq in April of 2007 to become our 36th Chief of Staff, believed at that point that the Army was out of balance, and over the next 6 months put us to work to create the Army Family Covenant. The commitment to funding that is steadfast. In 2007, our family and MWR programs were funded at about $749 million, and on the 1st of October 07, the beginning of fiscal year 08, that commitment was doubled to $1.4 million, most of which initially in OCO, and in 9 and beyond has been transferred into the base. So we're confident that the resources remain in place, at least for as far as we can see. At the same time, we also accept the responsibility to develop what General Casey calls a cost culture, where we turn a new page in our approach to fiscal management, where it's not about executing dollars, but it's about what we get for the money we spend in terms of the value we provide our service members and their families in exchange or in turn for their magnificent service.
Thank you. And either one.
Yes, sir. The 2 points I'd like to make for Navy, listening to the customer, we've been using CFI, the same contractor, for about 8 or 9 years now, so we've got some pretty good empirical data. We've been using it to shape our programs all along. Once we focus on which programs are the most important, we're now switching gears and looking at standardization and trying to deliver the program consistently across our bases and using the best practices of the bases we know do it exceedingly well and trying to economize in that fashion.
Sir, currently in this year, next year's budget, we have not taken any reductions in appropriated funds. But last year, as we did the POM, we did take some reductions in the POM through the POM process. What the Marine Corps has done and put in place for the future, as we go through developing the budget through the POM process, they have a prioritized list of programs, and these family programs are on that prioritized list. And before any reductions are recommended or projected in those areas, there has to be a decision made by the leadership of the Marine Corps on whether or not they'll take that. We're doing an assessment of our programs top to bottom. There's about 100 programs. We're looking at all of those programs. We're getting input from commanders as they rack and stack those programs as far as from their perspective. We're getting input from family members. We're also getting input from Marines, and we're looking at usage data before we decide we're going to reduce the funding in the programs. We want to see what the impact is going to be on mission and on the importance of those programs to Marines and families.
Thank all of you. And we've just been joined by Congressman Austin Scott. Congressman Scott also represents very significant facilities in the state of Georgia. We want to congratulate him, too. A great honor. He was elected the president of the freshman class of the 112th Congress, one of the largest freshman classes in the history of our nation. So that president of the class is pretty important, but he's even more important than usual. So congratulations. And we go to Congresswoman Susan Davis.
Thank you very much. And in many ways, I think you answered one of my first questions about the viability of the programs. Because one of the concerns that I think we have is that there are some individuals, and I'm sure some members of Congress as well, perhaps some new members, who would question whether or not we need to have commissaries and exchanges for our military families, and whether or not it wouldn't be fine for people to go shop in local community stores. I think the issue that sometimes gets lost is that the non-appropriated funding that comes from these activities impacts the programs that you've all been just talking about. So I wonder if there is perhaps one of the ways of helping us as well as we look to those programs and which ones have greater viability perhaps than others, is what would it look like if in fact we didn't have that kind of non-appropriated funding, we didn't have those resources. Is there a way that you would talk about that so that people would understand how important they are?
Right. You know, we build a sense of community with those programs first. It is a military community that has been at war for a long period of time. 60 to 70%, depending on the service, you know, of our service members and their families live off post. These programs bring them back together. When we're talking about our commissaries and our exchanges, it is a place of meeting not only for our active duty but for our Guard and Reserve and our retired service members. So that sense of community is absolutely essential. But there's the effectiveness issue as well in terms of the 31.5% savings in terms of a benefit for our commissaries. The fact that we have 923 child development centers where we can have our 180,000 of our 200,000 children who need that have a place to go. So it's a workforce issue as well. I think it's an ecosystem that we have built. And within that ecosystem, we have the efficiency, and we have the effectiveness, and we have the equity. And with this team, I would argue we have the innovation to be able to build that sense of community to sustain readiness and retention.
I don't know if anybody else wanted to comment further. Yes, Mr. Larson.
Yes, ma'am. To have these programs is part of I think they're critical. They're essential to the way we run the other programs. The non-appropriated fund programs support the other family programs, that some of which we get some appropriated funds for. Some of them, depending on what category they're in, we share the funding between appropriated and non-appropriated funds. But it's part of the non-paid compensation that we get for the service members. It's critical for them. We provide a savings and a value in the exchanges that they are able to buy things at about 27% less than in retailers outside the gate. So there's a real value to that, especially the young family members, so the young service members with families really realize that benefit. We have programs in place like My Cost is Your Cost, where we sell things at cost, whether diapers, formula, baby food, some of those other items like that, milk and eggs, milk and bread and things like that, to really help defray some of the cost of living that some of these young families are experiencing. The dividend that we realize from that funds these programs. And to take that away or to remove the appropriated funding from that would really restrict the ability to generate the non-appropriated funds, and it would cause us to have to put more money back into the program. So it's the connection between appropriated and non-appropriated funding for these programs is very important. It's critical to our ability to provide these services.
I would just add that, and I concur with everything said, that from a financial perspective, we earn about $200 million a year on our garrisons in non-appropriated funds to be used to support families. About 75% of that money is provided by the dividend from the Army and Air Force exchange system. So the continued viability of both the commissary and the exchange system is critical. I would also add that the lion's share of our appropriated funds are spent in recreation, but even more so in our Army Community Services, which provides counseling and family services, and our Child and Youth Services program. The survey of Army families just completed this past summer indicates that over 60% of our families are pleased with the way the Army is treating them after 9 years of war, and I think that really speaks for itself. Our leadership, General Casey and Lieutenant General Lynch, the commander of the Army Installation Management Command, frequently say that our Army is not going to break because of its soldiers, but it might break because of its families. And so therefore we need to stay resolute in our commitment to funding those things that help them feel good about who they are, what they do, and where they serve. Thank you.
I would just echo everything that's been said, and certainly the dividend stream from AAFES has an enormous impact on the quality of life programs and construction projects that we have in the Air Force. And taking that away or impacting that in any way would have a huge impact on quality of life programs.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Congressman Allen West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it really is an honor to sit here before each and every one of you. And having done 22 years of active duty service myself, coming from a father who served in World War II, a mother who did civilian service for 25 years with the Marine Corps District Headquarters in Atlanta, an older brother who served in Vietnam, a nephew who is a captain serving at Fort Knox right now, and also a wife who is a military dependent. Her father served 2 tours in Vietnam. 2 of her brothers served in the Air Force. And, of course, both of my daughters, who are 17 and 14 now, were born out at Fort Riley, Kansas, spent time at Fort Riley, Fort Leavenworth, Camp Lejeune, and then also Fort Hood, Texas. So what you're talking about here is very near and dear to my heart because my 2 daughters are beneficiaries of the great Army morale, welfare, and recreation programs. And also, I spent 3 years working for the Installation Management Command after I retired. So please give my regards to all of my friends at MCOM out there in San Antonio, Texas. But one of the things I'd like to bring up a question. This past Saturday, I had the opportunity of attending a Navy League event down at Fort Lauderdale, and the Chief of Staff of the Army U.S. Southcom was there, Major General Select Ayala. And we just talked about commissaries, and one of the things that he brought up is the amount of soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen we have in and around that headquarters. And he asked if they could get the opportunity of having a commissary built there for them. Because there's something about a commissary system, and it's not just about people going to a Walmart or Costco or whatever. It's a camaraderie that a commissary allows you to have, and then also when you think about a lot of the retirees there. So one of the things I would ask if you could do that assessment of looking at having a commissary system down there for the United States Southern Command, because I think it's very important. I think that when you look at the cost-benefit analysis, you will see that you could generate a lot of funds with the retired community down there. My real question is this: I saw how the Army on-post housing transformed when we went to the privatized system. And that was a great system because you were able to do a lot of things as far as the repairs and the responsiveness to the servicing of those quarters. And so I would ask, is that something that we have shared across all of our services to look at how we can improve the responsiveness of our on-base, on-post installation housing? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for your family service as well. I think we're doing, I'm going to let the services answer about how much they're sharing among themselves, but we're trying to institute more programs actually at the Department of Defense where we're actually bringing together the services to exchange information and ideas and best practices. We have a service-to-service meeting now where the deputy MNRAs come together. A real success story, for example, is the Army Spouse Employment Program, where the Army talked about that program, and we're looking at making that program purple now and expanding that to all military spouses in terms of availability for jobs. So I think with this new leadership, we are much more apt to get together to start to exchange ideas and best practices that are working. But let me defer to the services in terms of specifically housing.
Okay. Well, I don't think most of us in this on this panel don't really do housing, but I'll just give you a couple of points that that I might be aware of. As a former installation commander, I was a little familiar with some of the issues with housing, but I would offer that all the services have taken advantage of the PVA or PPV and able to do public-private ventures and improve the housing on the basis. If you go around and look across the board, when we have town hall meetings and we meet with service members, they routinely are very appreciative of what the services have done for them as far as the housing is concerned. And so I think we've made huge progress in that area. We're doing similar things in lots of other areas to see if we can get joint ventures with private companies to help us do different activities on our installations. So I think in that regard, it does have some applicability to the members of the panel here. And so we are working together on a lot of these things. We have several efforts that are ongoing to share information, and we actually, on a routine basis, the exchanges and commissaries are working together to try to improve the quality of services we provide to service members.
The Air Force has undergone similar privatization on the installations, which, of course, more and more Air Force personnel and families have moved off base as a result of that. One of our challenges from a quality of life and an MWR standpoint is how do we reach those families? And it almost becomes the model of the Guard and Reserve, where we have our military living out in communities and where we have less focus on the bricks and mortar piece of the installation on the base. What we do know through several surveys is at the end of the day, our military members are going home if they live off base. They're not hanging out at the clubs like they used to back in the day. They're going back where their families live. And we also realize that that sense of community is established in the neighborhoods that you live in, where you go to church, where your kids go to school. So what we're challenged with as we look through our programs and our efficiency drills is how we reach them and continue to support them with our MWR programs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back to you.
Thank you very much. And we next go to Congresswoman Madeline Bardallo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm very pleased to be on this Personnel Committee again. I was with you last time, and of course, Mrs. Davis. I have a couple of very important questions for Guam. The first question is for Secretary Gordon or Mr. Patrick, and it is regarding a contracting issue for MWR services on Guam. I understand that your office may not be the contracting authority, but it will certainly impact the quality of MWR services on Guam and the relationship between MWR services and our local business community. I understand that there may be a sole sourcing of the MWR service contract to an off-island firm when local companies that are hub zone certified are willing to do the work and are in fact currently performing this contract. I further understand that the contract may be sole sourced because of time constraints or personnel shortages at the contracting authority, which I believe is Fisk in Pearl Harbor. This is simply unacceptable to me, gentlemen, and I have long stated that all contracts on Guam should be competitively awarded. So can I get your commitment to work with our local MWR folks and the Joint Region Marianas to address this matter? I want to ensure that we have fair competition for this contract. The people of Guam are very concerned about it, and there will be other contracts that will be implemented in the future. So, Mr. Gordon, could I get your answer on that?
Thanks very much. Thank you very much. And I will certainly look into it. Competition is important.
Very good.
I'll take this for the record as well to dig into it, but I'll look into it.
Very good, because this was a competitive awarded contract, and now all of a sudden it's sole source. The second question I have, and Mr. Chairman, I have time for a second? Good. The military on Guam has a strategically important footprint and perform critically important missions for our country every day. MWR plays an important role in sustaining the readiness of the force. And to that extent, I'm wondering what more proactive efforts can be taken to work with the airlines that fly in and out of Guam to provide improved discounted offers for morale leave. I do know that Continental Airlines offers some discounted ticket prices, but service members on the bases still have a difficult time taking advantage of Guam's location and proximity to other Asian destinations because of the general high fares out there. So is this something that could be looked into further? And Mr. Gordon, you or anyone else that could answer that.
Well, I think there's a larger issue here, too, and I'm glad that you brought that up. And the question is how we are partnering with our nonprofit and our commercial sectors, given this new fiscal austerity that we are going to witness. So that's certainly worth looking into. At the same time, I think the good news story is we are looking and reaching out for those sorts of partnerships. A perfect example is our child care arena, where we are working with 13 states, for example, to do something about the shortage of roughly about 37,000 slots for child care. And it's these sorts of partnerships where we can once again reduce, for example, costs for our service members and their families, but at the same time get some efficiencies as a result that are worth looking into. So I'll certainly do that as well.
Good. And I think I have just a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds left here. This question, the third one, is for Mr. Milam with the Air Force. In your testimony, you discussed the Food Transformation Initiative in the Air Force. Can you discuss to what extent appropriate sustainability practices are utilized in this initiative? Are looking at providing food sources that within a 150-mile radius, as is generally accepted sustainability practice?
Ma'am, let me preface my response by explaining why we started food transformation, why we got into this. We're challenged. We have a platform, a food service delivery platform in the Air Force that's over 60 years old. It has a 32% utilization rate. It costs over $20 per plate to feed an airman, and quite frankly has the lowest customer satisfaction rate out of any of our MWR programs, about 67%. That's a D. That's not acceptable. So we're taking a hard look at transforming how we deliver food in the Air Force to certainly improve the quality, the variety, and the availability. We have contracted with Aramark Corporation, and we started out at 6 test locations that we have out there. The feedback that we have so far has been very positive. Across the board, we're looking at about a 22% increase in utilization. In fact, last week I was at MacDill Air Force Base at Tampa, and speaking with the personnel down there, they had an average customer rate of about 350 to 400. They're up to 1,300 customers per day. One of the problems they have is the throughput of bringing those people through, but the quality has certainly improved. We are delivering this food transformation effort through the contract, through a delivery order focusing on both the appropriated fund, the flight line feeding, as well as some NAF functions that they have out there. So there is a benefit certainly to the military, as is the contractor. Overall, there will be a savings with this initiative of about 25% for appropriated funds. So we're not only saving money, but we're improving the quality, the availability, and the variety of food. On average, we have increased food service at these locations from 66 hours per week to 112 hours per week. So this is a model that we want to adapt across the board. There's currently a GAO review, and I think they're going to report out to Congress around April timeframe. We would like to continue our food transformation effort at other locations in the Air Force.
Good. Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Congresswoman Vicki Hartzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is an honor to be on this subcommittee. I'm glad to be here today, and I'm proud to represent the Missouri's 4th Congressional District, not only Fort Leonard Wood, but also the Missouri National Guard Headquarters and Whiteman Air Force Base. And as a former family and consumer sciences teacher, child development is very important to me, and the family is very important. So I appreciate all of your priority and what you do to make family a priority in the armed services. Mr. Milam, in looking at some data that was provided for us ahead of time regarding the child care facilities, I just wanted to ask a question a little bit about the percentage rate for Category B funding. I know that at Whiteman Air Force Base we're very pleased with the stellar brand new child care facility there, the Susie Skelton Child Care Center. It's just absolutely beautiful, and I know it's very well received there on base. But from the data that I look at, it looks like that the Air Force overall has only a 56% investment in child care, and I just wondered what your thoughts were, given how important it is. You know, the Air Force seems to be a little out of step with providing services, contributing less funds than the other services are to this category. So what are your thoughts on that, and what is the Air Force doing?
Well, the fees are matching, where we get 50% appropriated fund support, and then the parent fees are matched 50-50. So we're a little bit above, I believe, the OSD requirement for that. Certainly, child care is very important in the military, and I have 2 children aged 5 and 6 who are in the program, so I fully understand that. When we survey our parents, certainly the most important thing for them is availability of child care. So if someone gave me more money, I think one of the first things I would do is look at the availability and increase spaces. Not only the spaces in a physical structure on the installation, but perhaps providing additional child care subsidies for our Guard and our Reserve units that are out there. I believe our fees are fair. They're in line with the new DoD fees, with the 9-tier structure, and the support that we currently provide in the APF meets the standards. So what we're focusing on now, ma'am, is to ensure that we can deliver more child care, availability of child care, to our airmen and their families. That is the piece that will reduce the stress on our families, is having child care. Now, certainly the cost of child care is a factor when we survey our families, but it is not the factor.
So I need a little clarity. I'm just new here. I thought the goal was 65%, and it's 56%. So you're saying that's well, you're not below the goal? Well,
the matching fee is 50-50. The goal to Category B activities is 65%.
Right. So you are.
We're meeting that.
We're getting there. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. We now have Congressman Austin Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Gordon and Mr. Milam, I represent Robins Air Force Base in Georgia, and we're blessed in Georgia with many bases, and certainly want to work with you to maintain that. And my question really gets back to with the MRW and any changes that are made, what guidance is the DoD going to give to the base commanders with regard to those changes? Or are the individual commanders going to be allowed to work with their personnel and determine what changes should be made to accommodate those budget-related issues?
Well, from the DoD perspective, ensuring a consistency, first of all, that we're meeting basically Cat A or Cat B or Cat C, very important, but that consistency in policy as well. At the same time, and I'll let Mr. Milan discuss the Air Force, you know, commanders have a great responsibility, and they are on the ground and really do understand the needs and requirements of their families and their service members. I recently visited both Fort Carson and Fort Campbell, and one of the instrumental aspects in terms of providing care is also an outreach to community. It's not just about what's going on, as we all know, on that post or base, but how well the command integrates with the community, because once again, most of our service members and their families live off post, they live off base. So those commanders and that sort of assessment is absolutely instrumental. At the same time, I do think we have the policies in place to ensure a consistency across the force. And we have an emphasis, basically, on our service members and their families in terms of the overall platform of morale, welfare, and recreation, and its importance to readiness and recruitment. With that, I'll turn it over to the Air Force, and we can get more specific.
Certainly the programs that we look at as far as efficiencies at the Air Force strategic level, there's not one size that fits all that I have found across our installations. In many respects, when we have an issue with child care at one base, we may not have that at another base, or a recreation program may be vibrant at one location and not the other. So it's difficult to say, let's trim these programs across the board. That's not a fair assessment. What we have to do is look at the installation specifically. And I think the installation commander certainly has the authority to make his or her own changes. Food transformation, for example, is a very, very positive impact on the airmen. But the current dining facility at Robbins may certainly fit the needs or may be suitable for those airmen that we have today. So again, whatever changes we make in the Air Force may not be a blanket change across the Air Force. I think the installation commander will still have the authority to make those changes.
All right. If I could just follow up with that, I do believe that the local base commanders and working with their people should be allowed the flexibility there, and I appreciate that and hope that we continue to pursue that. And just in what a member of the Navy on the West Coast desires as far as the recreational facilities may be very different from what a member of the Air Force and Central Georgia desires. And I think that if those decisions are left to the local base commander, instead of coming out of Washington, I think that's the best way to serve our men and women in uniform on those bases. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry.
We're very fortunate. We've just been joined, I don't know if he's ready, by Congressman Dr. Joe Heck from the Republic of Nevada. So we're very grateful to have Congressman, if you'd like to ask questions, we're doing, and this is the hearing in regard to morale, welfare, and recreation programs, and if you'd like to ask any questions, we'd be happy to hear from you. And actually, you've come right at the time as we prepare to adjourn. Hey, but it's really very appropriate that you came, because I was going to mention as we conclude how much I appreciate the freshmen participating. So thank you very much, and I hope that you find your experience on this committee, serving on the Armed Services Committee, rewarding. I know that as Congresswoman Davis was chairman, she certainly made sure everybody had the opportunity to participate, and so thank all of you. And Colonel West was here earlier, so a point that was made, Mr. Gordon, by you, and that is that your programs, as described so well today, are instrumental for a sense of community, which is the military. And then Colonel West was pointing out camaraderie. And to me, I think of people serving in the military as part of a military family. And it's a military family that's providing for young people in families opportunity for young people to serve to the highest and fulfill to the highest of their abilities. So I want to thank you for letting that occur. And we do have time for Ms. Davis to ask another question as we get ready to conclude. And then Dr. Heck, if you do want to participate, we'd be happy for a question, but it's your call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Dr. Heck. Surely, this might give you a little breathing space if you had a question. One or two here, really. This goes to you, Mr. Gordon. One of the concerns that I hear frequently, in fact, I just heard it the other day when I was meeting with a number of sailors at 32nd Street in San Diego, has to do with special needs children and the families, the challenges that they face. During the National Defense Authorization Act review and our passage of that for 2010, we had a requirement in the bill that established the Office of Community Support for Military Families with Special Needs under the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. And I understand that this may not be directly in your lane. However, I want to ask you a little bit about any of your involvement in that, because it does feel as if those two departments, at least, would possibly be working together and developing that program. What's been your involvement, and where are we?
Good question. And the office does come under Military, Community, and Family Policy. It's run by Dr. Rebecca Passante. Where we are is we've staffed up. We've staffed up the office. She has her full complement, basically, of staff members. Let me preface moving on by saying before I came to this job, I was in a nonprofit community where we were very focused on youth with disabilities. And so I don't come to this with a degree of naivete about what we need to do in this area. Because prior to this, very focused on how we empower our youth with disabilities, how we make people aware of their needs and what they can do in our society in terms of making it very productive, but also their needs in terms of key aspects based on what the disability is. And so in terms of special needs, we've got an office now with the kind of leadership that can focus on those key areas for our service members who have families with special needs. So I would say first, we've staffed up with the right people. I would say second, we're going to start conducting, and we're engaged in this now, a survey of what those needs might be and how we might best address them. One of the issues for our service members and their families is education. It's a perfect example, and where our children are going with special needs and whether they're getting the quality care that they need, and if there are alternative ways of doing that better. So that's one of the things that we're going to look at. But I'm happy to say that we've got the staff in place. We are still coming up with a blueprint for action, and we look forward to working with the services in Congress on that.
Great. Well, I'm glad to hear that it's moving along. And in some ways, the establishment of that office was also because we knew that it's pretty difficult to answer all the needs of all the families out there. But if we have one particular place, that can be helpful. Did the DOD then provide the $50 million that was directed in the law to that office? Is the money there, and is it being utilized?
Good question. I'll have to take that for the record to make sure that it is. We've got what we need at this point in time to really get a good start. Whether the full funding was provided, let me take that for the record and get back to you.
Great. Thank you. And also, I just wanted to mention, we know that there was an Army Family Conference just recently, and they highlighted at that conference a number of needs: the high suicide rate, the lengths of deployment, short dwell times, lack of PTSD, screening, and rising divorce rates as some of the top areas within the Army. And so I'm wondering, Mr. Patrick and Mr. Larson and Mr. Milam, if you have also identified say the top 3 or 4 concerns within your service.
Ma'am, what they are. Yes, ma'am. We have a similar annual conference. It's our Caring for People conference, and last year we had a special group for the special needs families, and they've identified several challenges. I'm proud to say that we now have a trained exceptional family member program coordinator at all of our installations. We hired 35 full-time, those with installations that had 175 or more special needs families, and those that had less, it became an additional duty at the Airmen and Family Readiness Centers. Beginning next month, we will have a robust respite program for our special needs families, up to 20 hours of care per week to give those families a break. And this is all about reducing the stress on those families, as you mentioned, and how we can do that. But having those exceptional family member program coordinators at the installation now takes some of the burden away from the families. When they move from base to base, they can go to that single point of contact and have all of their personnel-related questions, their medical-related questions, and get pointed in the right direction, where before they really never had those services. So we've come a long way in the Air Force with a long way to go.
Thank you. Anybody else want to comment quickly? I think my time is up.
Yes, ma'am. Very quickly, you know, the Exceptional Family Member Program in the Marine Corps has been one of the priorities of the previous commandant, and is shared. The passion for that program is shared by the current commandant and his wife. The enrollment in the program is up by about 43% over what it was. If you look at 2001, we had about 4,500 people that were enrolled in the Exceptional Family Member Program. Today, there's not quite 10,000. So there's a significant increase. We think there's still room to grow based on the propensity of some of these conditions that could be as much as about 16,000. So there is still room to continue to grow. We have caseworkers, 1 per 225. We have respite care that's provided to all of the members that are the service members, families that are in the program, 40 hours a month for respite care. So we're doing a number of things to help address those needs. Additionally, on the issue of suicide and dwell time and some of those other factors, they have a significant impact on the readiness of the force and the ability for us to regenerate and be resilient. If you look at the Marine Corps this year, and we don't have a silver bullet and we don't know the answer, but our suicide rate is down and the numbers are down from 62 last year to 39 this past year. So it's significantly reduced. Why? Because the leadership has been focused on it. The commanders are involved. We've done training of the individual Marines. There's peer-to-peer training and different things that we have done. We've put things in place to really try to make an impact on that serious situation. And I think we're making progress. But, we're not advertising that we have solved suicide or anything like that. But because of the engaged leadership of the senior leadership of the Marine Corps, we have made an impact in some of those areas.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Congressman Joe Heck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my apologies to you, the committee members and the panel, for my tardiness, but I'm quickly becoming well-versed in conflicting subcommittee meetings. Mr. Gorman, my question is for you. Hua, thank you for being here. I quickly glanced through your packet, and I saw that you mentioned, I don't know if you did in your testimony again, but in the writing about the Army One Source program. I want to, from someone whose family has used it, having been a deployed service member and relied on Army One Source for simple things like finding a plumber when I wasn't home to fix a problem. I think that's a great program. I also saw that you referred to the Army Community Covenant program. Excellent program. I'm actually going to be participating in a covenant signing this weekend in Pinellas Park, Florida. What I didn't see in there, and I don't know if this is in your lane, the Strong Bonds program.
It touches us. Strong Bonds is actually a chaplain's program, but we're their number one assist, if you will. 3 of our 4 Armed Forces Recreation Centers in Garmisch, Germany, in Seoul, Korea, and at the Haleakala in Honolulu, Hawaii, are the major sources of where those events are held. General Corelli, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, at the Army Family Action Plan meeting 3 years ago, I guess it was. And in that process, we always ask the delegates, and we just finished this year's program 2 weeks ago, give us 5 things that are working and 5 that are not. From one year to the next, behavioral counseling, or lack of it, went from being the most significant issue to not even on the list. General Corelli tied that to 2 reasons. One, through the gracious of the OSD, we have the Military Family Life Consultants and Strong Bonds. It attempts to get in a collegial way at those at greatest risk for marital problems. The entire Army is focused on suicide reduction through a wide range of resiliency programs. So I couldn't say enough for Strong Bonds. We don't per se operate the program, but we're in support in a big way.
Right, and I appreciate it. It's a phenomenal program, and it goes exactly to the points that you mentioned about trying to reintegrate the deployed family members as well as decreasing some of the suicide risks. Do you see if possible, a bigger role for your organization in trying to reach out and provide more of those programs in a more timely, cost-effective manner?
I see our role like our overarching challenge to ever be more efficient with the dollars we're blessed to have, to help the chaplains use each dollar more effectively for the purpose that they've got them, which is to identify the challenges our young men and women and their families feel and help address them.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Corman. I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Heck, for your being so proactive and involved. This is great. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for being here today, the witnesses, and we appreciate all that you do for our service members, military families, and veterans. And at this time, we shall be adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.